So, kind of had a funny idea with this review. I kind of thought of doing the review backwards. But what's the point of that? What's really the point of that? So, Tenet is the latest film by Christopher Nolan. It stars John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, and Kenneth Branagh. And it's kind of hard to describe this movie in a few words, but I'll say someone is hired to basically try to prevent World War III through time inversion. So, going to this movie, when I first heard about it, I just saw Christopher Nolan has a new movie coming out, and I was like, okay, I'm already signed up. You don't have to tell me what it's about, who's in it. You don't have to tell me anything. You just say Christopher Nolan, and I'm like, I'm there. Because to me, Nolan is always one of those directors that I'm always interested in, no matter what. He was one of the first filmmakers who got to me, I would say. Like, I saw some of his movies, I'm like, I don't know what this guy's doing, but I want to do that. And no matter what he does, he's always doing something different. He's doing something unique with his films, no matter what. So I'm always interested. I was interested in this cast. I was interested in this premise. And obviously with the pandemic shutting down all theaters, this was actually the first time I've actually been in a movie theater since March, surprisingly. And wow, it's been so long. And this is also an IMAX movie that I went to, so that was really cool as well. That was my plan from the beginning when I saw there was a new movie coming out. I was like, okay, I'm going to see this one in IMAX. I'm going to try to see it. And I was definitely very invested into this movie. And how was the movie as a whole? This movie is, honestly, this is a very hard movie to review. Even with spoilers, honestly. This is a spoiler-free review, so I'm going to try to do a spoiler review this weekend. But honestly, I saw this movie 2 days ago, and I'm still trying to grapple with all the themes that it had and how things played out. So let's start off with what I liked. Honestly, I thought all the acting was really good. John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, Kenneth Branagh. They're the four main characters in this movie. And they're all good in the sense, like Robert Pattinson and John David Washington, they work well together as a team. There's not really much about their characters as who they are as people, but or what they've done in their past, but you can kind of get a sense of who they are, I would say. Elizabeth Debicki, I said she's good in the movie. Her performance is really good, but I would also say her character is underwritten, but I'll address that in my negatives. And I heard, like, when this movie was first screened, some people didn't like how emotionless it was. Honestly, or, like, I read one review, the quote was, "It's a humorless disappointment." And I'm like, were you expecting this movie to be funny? Huh. But anyway, I kind of took it as, oh, there was, like, no emotion or anything like that. And surprisingly, I got a few laughs. Everyone kind of got, like, a little quip in every once in a while. So it's probably Nolan's funniest movie, too, surprisingly. It's most confusing, as well. I'll get to that. The movie is very intense throughout, like, the opening scene alone. I'm not going to talk about it or anything, but it's very intense. The music is booming right in your ear. Again, IMAX, so it was that. And, like, the action, it's very interesting throughout, like, how you see these people who are, like, moving forward in time and to find people who are moving backwards in time. That's very interesting. The score is also very interesting as well. He's not using Hans Zimmer as he usually does. It's Ludwig Göransson, who's done the Black Panther score. And the score is incredible. It was just booming in my ear. It's like I felt it in my bones afterwards. It was incredible. And the thing with this movie, too, is that it honestly feels like two movies in one. Like a bunch of Nolan's movies, they definitely feel like they're different types of movies all in one movie. In this one, it feels like, first it's a spy movie with some action in it, and then it feels like an action movie with some spy stuff in it. It's like, those may sound like the same thing, but they're not. And that's the thing about this movie, too, is like, around the halfway mark, that's when it changes, I would say. And a lot of people said, oh, this is his most confusing movie yet. And for the first half, I'm like, this is really easy to follow. Even like, okay, that might not make sense on paper, but it's like, I'm still following it. It needs to make sense. And then somewhere around the halfway mark, I'm like, wait, what? Huh? What just happened? How? And it's not like it's in a bad way or anything. I want to watch this movie again. Not in theaters, obviously, because, well, everything. And kind of try to understand it more. So, which kind of starts to lead me into the stuff I really didn't care for. Some characters are either underwritten or overwritten, I would say. Like Kenneth Branagh. Now, when I first saw him in a trailer and heard him speak, I thought the worst thing about him would be his Russian accent. Turns out he's not. That's not the worst thing. The worst thing is, basically he's the villain of the movie, and you do get the sense that he's evil, when we first meet him. But then he does something later in the movie that's, I think, kind of crossed the line. It's like, we know this guy's evil. We know this guy is going to do something really evil eventually. But they do something afterward in the middle of this whole movie where I'm like, do we really have to do that, honestly? It just seemed unnecessary. Overall, he's kind of a generic villain. He doesn't really have... He's got personality, and he's got a goal in mind, but not much else. Meanwhile, I mentioned Debicki's performance is good, but they're trying to write in too many tropes and traps for her character, and I would get into that in the spoiler review for this movie. But it's like, it's literally Nolan wanting to have his cake and eating it too. So, it's like, we want to show her character like this, and then we'll show her character like this, the complete opposite later, because character growth, I guess. Meanwhile, John David Washington in this movie, as good as he is in this movie, actually, for some reason, he doesn't have a name, which I found odd. And it's like, they keep referring to him as the protagonist in this movie. Like, some of the higher-ups, they keep saying, oh, you're the protagonist, so... Okay, what's this guy's name, though? And literally, in the end credits, he's listed as protagonist, which I'm like, really? Like, what's the point of him not having a name? Like I read somewhere in an interview where Nolan was talking about when he cast Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar. It's like, oh, he has this every guy vibe, and honestly, like, looking back, that character would have been better for a no-name character, because it's like, oh, it could be anyone. It could be any name in the world. But yet this guy's like, he's super important. What's his name? We don't know. Meanwhile, obviously, this movie, I didn't want to know about any spoilers before this movie, obviously. Tried to avoid leaks, tried to avoid all reviews as much as I can. And there were some surprises in this movie where it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then I think about it more, and I'm like, wait a minute. Nolan's done this before. Nolan's done this in other movies. Like, there's this one twist in the end of the second act. I'm not sure, because the pacing of this movie is a little wonky at times. There's a twist here that was in another one of these movies. It's in one of these movies, as you'll see. And it's like, okay, people didn't like that twist in that movie, so we're going to kind of put it in this one, and hopefully people like it more. Well, we'll see. And kind of like, I liked it at first, but then I was like, wait a minute. I've seen this before. Which was kind of like my big complaint about Dunkirk. It's like, this movie has never been done before. I'm like, yeah, it has. Nolan's done this before. Like, oh well. As I mentioned, the pacing for a while, like, I thought it was like kind of moving really fast. So I thought that was pretty good, especially for a 2.5 hour movie. But then the movie kind of has multiple endings, I would say. Because, like, oh, this is part of the ending here. And then it's actually not. And there's another scene that you think is going to be part of the ending. And it's not. The scene that's supposed to be like an epilogue. And it's not. And then they have the big final climax. And it's like, okay, that's pretty much the ending. And then there's, like, a little epilogue afterwards. But it kind of felt like, yeah, there were, like, multiple endings throughout this movie. It's like, again, Nolan wants to have his cake and eat it too, so... So, overall, Tenet it's an interesting experience. It's definitely worth watching in the theater. Obviously, if you do not feel comfortable in a movie theater, do not go to a movie theater. Because admittedly, I was uncomfortable seeing it in a movie theater because germaphobe and everything. It's definitely a movie worth watching at some point, especially if you're a Nolan fan. If you don't really care for Nolan's work, you're not going to like this movie. You're really not going to like this movie. It's definitely a movie I'm going to watch again. I'll definitely buy it on Blu-ray. And I definitely want to learn more so I can understand it more. I'll still give Tenet 3 out of 4 stars. See it. So, what is your favorite Christopher Nolan movie? Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. And watch this in reverse. I don't know.